much discussion of this in Orthodox Judaism because it's very uncomfortable. Nobody wants to really talk about it from a rational, because it's the foundation upon which everything else depends. And so it's like, but I mean, it's not that much more difficult than the Talmud. The Talmud is regarded as the oral Torah that was given by God at Mount Sinai to Moses.
Right.
And yet the Talmud has all these discussions between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. This goes back to Mount Sinai, 1,200 years before Hillel and Shammai.
But then you've got someone like Rashi, who, he's got the art scroll, I mean, who's sitting there and explicating these chapters, I mean, breaking them apart. So clearly he's not...
But he accepts that this was divine and unitary and given by God to Moses 3,200 years ago. He never challenges that. And the problem is, like Orthodox want to say, okay, this shows we're not fundamentalists because we've got an interpretive tradition. One, that has nothing to do with fundamentalism. Fundamentalism simply certain fundamental beliefs. It's still fundamentalist. It makes it even more fundamentalist because not only is the text divine, but the whole chain of tradition is also authoritative too. So that simply layers more authority on top of the divine text.
Yeah, because it does feel like in many instances, I don't have it in front of me, but that Rashi does kind of challenge the text. I mean, and that's
but he never challenges the divinity of the text or the Mosaic authorship of the text or any of the fundamental beliefs that the Rambam put down as the 13 essential principles.
Yeah.
It's just like on the communism. There are certain things you're allowed to challenge. Mm-hmm. Like even in the days of Tas and Stalin, you're allowed to challenge certain things. You just weren't allowed to challenge any of the fundamental beliefs and structures of the state. But you're allowed to challenge whether, like so-and-so commissar is doing a good job with the pig production.
Yeah.
And so too, Rashi can challenge certain things, but there are other things that are not even discussed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that analogy between Orthodox Judaism and 20th century Soviet communism?
That could get you into trouble.
It was just off the top of my head, Rabbi.
Well, it's also very much, through another one and make it the real truth, evil axis, that fundamentalist Christianity believes the same type of thing.
Yeah, they believe the text is divine, and they also believe the 5 books were given to Moses.
Yeah, they do. They believe that it was
right.
given to Moses. I mean, that's the family I grew up in. I mean, the community I grew up in believes that. So.
And then Muslims, all believing Muslims by definition believe that the Quran was given by God to Muhammad. And as soon as you challenge the veracity that one word of it was not given by God to Muhammad, you're no longer a Muslim. So Islam doesn't accept any, like we have Reform and Conservative Judaism, there's no Reform and Conservative Islam.
Right.
So what strikes you, Helen, when you look at the first chapter of Genesis, if anything? Is this just like so familiar that it's boring?
No, it's not boring. Even though it is obviously very familiar. It's not boring. I think that it's always fun for me to read, these first chapters because it's so visual and vibrant and colorful. I think that's really what strikes me is...
So do you believe that God literally made the world in 7 days?
No.
So how do you relate to this text then?
I guess I relate to it sort of as an introductory course to appreciating the world around you. And not just appreciating it, but cultivating awareness of it.
Right.
Because so often we really lack awareness of our surroundings, and everything kind of goes by in a blur, and we're also preoccupied with our own little day-to-day issues that we forget to sort of just look and say, holy cow, that is pretty exquisite, And so I think it's sort of like this reminder to stop and look at what we take for granted.
Or as the Eagles put it so well, so often we lead our lives in chains that we don't even know we have the key.
It's a good one.
Famous Torah commentators.
Yes.
I think they pulled that out of the Ecclesiastes.
So, Monica, do you believe that God made the world in 7 days?
I don't know. And I don't care. I don't think it matters. Maybe, maybe not. I think what we do see in Genesis 1, though, is a sense of order and balance. And that seems to be the thing that's more important. And also, there's a very strong emphasis on, God said, God called, God said, God called, God said, it was so. There's this, there's a focus on speaking, on saying, that I think is really interesting.
Power of words
Yeah.
and language.
Yeah, I mean, words create worlds, right? And
Right.
literally, that's what's happening here. And I think that just goes back to what I said earlier about if there's a way to read or approach Torah, it's in a method that generates dialogue, the spoken words that are spoken to each other. And I may be reading between the lines, but I think we do get a sense of that. Just in the first 8 verses of Genesis 1. I mean, it's just very interesting from a literary perspective, and I know I'm always going back to literary because that's what I do. So I can't help but do that. Verses 2 through 5. There's this idea of, I don't know, they're really, to me, well, let's say verses 3, 4, and 5, there seems to be a really strong opposition to binary kinds of thinking, right? God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw the light, that it was good. God separated the light from the darkness. Well, what was it before, right? God separated the light from the darkness.
And this is before the sun was created, so what kind of light was this?
Exactly. I think there are 4 different kinds of darkness that we see in the first chapter of Genesis. But what was it before? Light from the darkness. You can take light from darkness. They don't exist as 2 polar opposites, right? I think that's a really interesting idea. Even just in terms of thinking about modern discussions of evil, good versus evil, bad versus good, whatever. Somebody once explained it to me as, there's no such thing as good and evil. Evil is really just a deficiency of good. It's the darkness or this other thing where light and darkness are mixed up with too much of the light taken out of it. Like they don't actually exist.
Is there any
as
mention of
opposing
evil?
forces. No, but we equate. I mean, that might be...
We equate the dark with evil?
We do. I mean, traditionally, I don't even think that's like a contemporary thing. I mean, I think that darkness has always been equated with evil. And I think that's a problem that's rectified right here. And I also like verse 5, God called the light day. And in mine, day is capitalized. It's as if he's naming it, rather than... Or, I mean, not naming it. It's as if he's not naming it. It's as if he's summoning it, as if it's some kind of, entity of its own, or some kind of, I don't know, in the darkness he called night. See, mine are capitalized.
Yeah.
Are yours capitalized?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's as if, this is going to sound bad, but it's as if he didn't create those things. It's as if they existed and he's summoning them to him. I wonder how that changes our reading of the text if we see it that way.
What strikes you, Helen, about Genesis chapter 1?
A lot. The one thing that I've sort of honed in on right now is the sentence that says,